Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, today. Really appreciate you taking the time to learn about our Master of Legal Studies program here at UCLA School of Law. My name is Jason Fiske. I'm the Executive Director of the program. And here with me are four of our journalists that we have in our program. One of them who is a graduate of our program, they've all really grateful for them to take the time to share their experience. And before I jump off, send it right off to them, I just want to say just a couple details about the program in case you haven't seen it in the e-brochures and whatnot. But for you all specifically, we have an April 1st deadline to apply for our what we call the Dean's Journalist Scholarship Award. And this is a full tuition scholarship, and which would apply for whatever length of time you choose to stay as a student. And that's, again, you have to get your full application in by April 1st to be considered for that scholarship. And again, I just want to make it clear that's full tuition, which is pretty generous, but you would still pay the university fees each semester, which is about $800 or $900 or so. And then it books, whatever, little bit extra for there too. But the tuition would be covered under that. But even those journalists who don't get the full tuition scholarship, we give very generous scholarships to the journalists, and so thus there is still very high levels of scholarship that we would give to journalists who are accepted into the program. So just want to start off by saying that you can take either the part-time program or the full-time program. Actually, Penny Rosenberg, who's here, opted to do the full-time and did a sabbatical from work for 9 months. But the other three journalists are all in our part-time program and doing it that way. So we've kind of built a program that's flexible to make that work. That would be on campus starting this August. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off here with our panel. Now, I do also have to mention that for me, I'm in a bit of an awkward position here, as I'm the least qualified person to be asking questions, because for not just the panelists, but all of you attendees as far as that. So I'm more nervous than I would be normally as far asking journalists questions. But anyway, with putting that aside, my first question to everyone is, for one, just to kind of introduce yourself, say what your background is, but also to say what drew you to the program. What was it that kind of made you want to join up with this program? And we're going to start with Ryan Carter.
Hello, good afternoon now, 6 minutes into it. Everybody, yes, thank you, Jason. My name is Ryan Carter. I'm a part-time student in the program. I'm a journalist. I'm an editor and reporter at the Southern California News Group. I gotta say, I've mentioned this to Jason a million times, but I as an undergraduate, I'd always had an interest sort of coming out of undergraduate in law school. But, as we all know, one thing leads to another in our careers, and things happen. And years later, that this opportunity popped up, and I was really intrigued by it. And after some pondering, after a little bit of reflection, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I would love to be back at UCLA. I'd always sort of walked by the law school as an undergrad and said, gee, it'd be neat to be a law student there someday. And so there was that element to it. But, beyond sort of that sort of romantic view of it, I really, there was an intellectual fulfillment that I thought it could satisfy, which it has. Sort of the idea of being sort of demystified. I wanted to sort of demystify the law a little bit as journalists. We definitely have our encounters with the legal system in terms of talking to sources, in terms of studying the legal system for the content that we produce. And it seemed like it could really benefit in that sort of general sense. And then there was just sort of the legal reasoning aspect of it, which I felt like I wanted to try to get my head around. I'm still working on that, but it's happening. And so for all those reasons, I felt like it was cool. And then just to sort of be with other people that were like me, they've sort of, had a career or in the midst of their careers, like-minded in that sense. And I felt like that could all come together in a really cool experience. So that was me.
Thanks, Ryan. And next up is Alejandra. Alejandra was the winner of our second classes, Dean's Journalist Scholarship. So Alejandra.
Thanks, Jason, for inviting us. My name is Alejandra Reyes. I'm a general assignment reporter at the LA Times, but I spend a lot of time covering the experience of Latinos in Los Angeles. Spent a lot of time covering the pandemic and immigrant life, the life of immigrants in LA. And what drew me to the program? I remember there was a time when kind of things were all shut down that I was kind of craving that like intellectual stimulation and craving going back to school. And I kind of fantasized with the idea of law school because I knew that other journalists like in the past had kind of gone that route, but I'd never envisioned myself like becoming a lawyer or I just didn't imagine that it would be possible for where I am in my career and financially to pursue a law degree. So when this conveniently came up, I thought it was just like the perfect opportunity. Also, I spend a lot of time thinking about the law in context of immigration. I'm daughter of immigrants. My dad was deported, so I think a lot about the law in that context. So on a personal level, this intrigued me. And yeah, I think similar to Ryan, I'm a UCLA alumna, and I just like I really wanted to go back to UCLA, and it's such a like familiar, welcoming environment for me. So to be able to go back to UCLA specifically was really appealing to me.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing. Now, next up is Jacqueline. Jacqueline was the inaugural winner of the Dean's Journalist Scholarship, and this is our third incoming class coming up. So both of the two winners are here today. So Jacqueline.
Howdy, y'all. My name's Jacqueline Cosgrove. My pronouns are they, them, and I am a assistant editor at the LA Times. I'm overseeing a year-long initiative on mental health coverage. And I wanted to do the program for similar reasons to Ryan and Alejandra. I knew I wanted to get a master's degree, and I had debated with myself what that would be. And then once I learned more about the program, I was just like, this sounds like a great idea. I've always been really interested in the criminal justice system. I grew up 10 miles west of a really big prison. And so one of the pastimes in my community is going to the prison rodeo, which brings up a lot of questions. And so, yeah, I just sort of, I just always had a lot of questions about, prison conditions and the intersection of mental health and prisons. And so that's been really great. As I've taken my classes, I've learned so much and much more confident in the courtroom to understand what the heck is going on. Because sometimes there's those like the lawyers are like debating things that like, you're not going to put in the newspaper, but you kind of like wish you knew what was going on. But now I do know what's going on. So yeah, it's been a great experience, and I'm really happy I did it. It was very daunting at first. The classes are challenging. Private law is the hardest class I've ever taken in my academic career. I still have like flashbacks to the final. Oh my God. So it is a very challenging program, but in a good way. The professors are just so nice. It's not like in the movies where like law professors just yell at you and want to humiliate you. Like that's really not the vibe at UCLA. And like I'd tell you, because I'm just too anxious for that. So it's pretty cool. Like they push back and they ask you like questions, but then like it's just all to make you think, and they just want you to like think about the other side. And it's very much like gets you out of a binary thinking that I think we can fall into as journalists. I think it has increased my appetite for taking on really complicated stories and feeling confident with those. So I just sort of feel my brain growing and wiggling all the time as I'm in class. It's been a great experience, and I've made really good friends. I didn't know Ryan or Penny before, and there's other people in the program. It's good for networking, but I personally like it better for friendship. I've just met some really cool people that I never would have met before. So that's been really nice, especially during the pandemic. Like, we were able to get, I think, close because I just, we were all in this together. I joked that, like, when I would go to class, because at first it was virtual because of the pandemic, and I joked like I was in a very challenging support group. So yeah, anyway, I'll let y'all hear from the one and only Penny Rosenberg.
Thanks, Jacqueline. And last but certainly not least is Penny, and she was in our inaugural class with Ryan and Jacqueline, and she actually is graduated because she was, as I mentioned at the beginning, she was a full-time student who took a sabbatical and was able to be in our very first graduating class of students. So Penny.
Hi, thank you. So yeah, at the time I was the city editor of the Pasadena Star News and the San Gabriel Valley Tribune with your daily news. But since then, I have taken a new job, and I do credit the M.L.S program for kind of lifting my profile. I also, kind of boring, I was a UCLA undergrad, but probably a lot longer time ago than my fellow journalists here, but a good 30 something years ago. And I had always wanted to get a master's degree too. So kind of similar refrain. And I actually investigated a couple programs, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, not law school, and they just didn't hit right. So when I got the email about a potential Fulbright scholarship, I was very intrigued. It checked all the boxes. And so I applied for that. And even though Jacqueline got it, well deserved, I actually got a really good one that I kind of did the math, and I thought I could do this full time and take that sabbatical. So I just kind of tightened my belt and threw myself into it as a full-time student, which I recommend if you can pull it off, because it was amazing. It's a little scary because immediately you go from some of these kind of like baby step classes, and by baby step, they're not easy. I think Jacqueline laid that out, but there's definitely some kind of foundational classes that you take, and then you're like, bam, you're right there with the 2 L's and the 3 L's in the law school, taking those classes with them, like in a hot minute. But it was great, and I loved it, and I miss it. I used it to take all sorts of classes on the similar subjects that my reporters report on. So education law and urban planning and land use law and environmental law and First Amendment, things that come up a lot of times on the job. And I've got a really great anecdote for you later, Jacqueline, about private law and how, bam, it has just come through for you. So it's been great, and I'm a little jealous that y'all are still there, but I'm also very grateful for the opportunity of being a full-time student and really soaking it in.
Thanks, Penny. So the next kind of topic question that I'll ask is specifically, like, how has this program helped your journalism, and kind of, under that kind of lens? And so Alejandra, we're gonna start with you this time.
Yeah, like in class, there's a lot of HR folks in the program, and they're always talking about, how it relates to them, because they're dealing with like issues of the law more directly, I think, than us. But sorry about that. But it definitely has helped. Like I think back to when I was on the breaking news desk and kind of just starting out in my career and having to write a lot of breaking news posts based on like lawsuits and legal complaints, and just like stumbling through trying to understand all the language and what everything meant and what I could say and couldn't say. And at the time I had a really scary experience where we got like a threat of a lawsuit from like a plastic surgeon who was being sued. And I was very afraid, very kind of nervous, had to sit with our lawyer and like go through the story. It was a very terrifying experience. but I feel like had I had the context that I do now, and had I gone through the classes, like for example, American Dispute Resolution System, which goes through like every step of a lawsuit, I would have had so much confidence in that situation, in writing, but also in talking to our lawyer about the story. Most of the time I'm writing like narrative stories and talking to members in the community, just average people. But I'm actually also starting an investigation and having to do like public records requests. And recently got a response back that, you know, we can't give you XYZ because this and that. And they mentioned work product, and that some of the information was protected because it was work product. And, you know, so they couldn't disclose that. And we were studying work product that week in my ADR class. So stuff like that has been really helpful. Like, you know, now I can say like, okay, we can let that go, or okay, I can push harder on this way, or I can make my records request stronger in this way in the future. So yeah, things like that. It's been really awesome to see how it's applying to my job, even if I'm not, you know, like writing about the law every day or reading ordinances every day and things like that. It's still been very useful. So yeah.
Thanks. And Jacqueline.
Yeah, I mean, similar to Alejandra, I had a celebrity who wanted to sue me. You know, I also had to go through the process with our lawyer. This was probably 6 to 8 months ago. And, you know, and I was very interested in like, does this person even have a case? You know, like I was a lot more skeptical than I previously would have been, because this was a powerful person with a big following, really flexing. And it came down to, I was like, no, they don't have a case. Like I did my job. They're just mad that I did my job. And so that's really nice. I also like really enjoyed, there's a class you take, it's like a legal communication analysis writing class. And I don't know if Professor Merrill does this every semester, but our class was very much focused on different media related laws. And so it was really fun because you're writing about like copyright and the First Amendment, and like you're learning how to do these different legal briefs and write like legal letters. And so I can see myself, like if somebody doesn't want to give me records and our attorneys are swamped, like I could see myself drawing up my own letter and like pulling from case law. And like I feel very confident of like I can go into Westlaw or LexisNexis and like search for terms and find my cases. You know, I used to cover LA County government. They're basically like a big black box. And so like, you know, there's even a case about public records about them. And I know how to find that now really easily. So I just feel like it really, it's really built on my existing journalism education that I got at Oklahoma State. I didn't realize I was the only non-UCLA undergrad, but yeah. So, and then I think overall, just like, might sound strange, but I feel like I've become a better listener when people are talking, and I really like, I think differently, and I'm slower to rush to judgments. And I'm also like, we had this one professor, Professor Olson. We took, Ryan and I both took the criminal injustice system. And so it's all about how like, someone who was innocent, how that conspiracy basically got built. And she really walks you through like the most dramatic examples all the way down to like someone lying and thinking they're doing the right thing, and how that can like really snowball. And so like, I don't know, it just made me realize like with like when you're looking at like innocence cases, for example, they're generally a lot more complicated, and maybe people didn't necessarily realize what they were doing and how it would affect a person's life. So it really is sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but it's really challenged just a lot of my pre-existing beliefs and made me like recognize them a lot more quickly. I think I'm a lot more mindful of my bias, because we all have those, you know, it's not just what we're registered for to vote for. So it's been really nice. I feel like, yeah, anyway, I could say a lot more because I've had a lot of fun. I'm a little sad to graduate in May.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Penny.
Yes, hi, thank you. So Now I am the editor of 2 newspapers in Oregon. So that's where I've moved off, and thus the scarf. So being the top editor here, I get thrown a lot of different things. So this is the anecdote that kind of ties in 4 different classes, 3 or 4 different classes, but we ran a file photo from 2015, properly labeled. And it was of a vineyard, which has since changed hands. It's an LLC, which we learned a lot about in business law. And the new partner, which is the major partner, the silent partner, is actually the one who contacted me, wasn't so silent, and was upset that we used the old name. And he said, you know, this is a contract that I have with the new owners, and I could get in a lot of hot water for this. I said, first of all, this is our intellectual property. Thank you, Professor Kropkin. Our photo, we labeled it 2015 photo, and I'm not a party to your contract. Like there's no mutual assent here. So, see that, Jacqueline? No mutual assent. So, you know, we had a conversation back and forth. I did have to kick it up to the attorney who completely was saying the exact same things that I was saying. So it was just really interesting. That was business law, it was First Amendment, it was intellectual property, and it was contract law, all of that in one anecdote. But it comes up 2-3 times a week where something that I learned in law school, quite frankly, a story that we wrote, I think it was Thursday on deadline, get one of those news items at 3 or 4 o'clock in the day, I think maybe 5 o'clock in the day, about a court ruling. And I always have my reporters send me a copy of the opinion because I want to read it. And I felt like I really had to assist him in writing it just because it was a little foreign to him. It wasn't foreign to me. And I felt like I was writing a case brief about this decision about the governor's powers in commutations. It was super interesting, and I felt like that was my goal, to bring nuance and understanding to the subjects that we cover. And so I am grateful for it every week, 2-3 times a week at least. Some class comes to mind, some professor's voice is in my ear.
Love those anecdotes. Ryan.
Yeah, I am right there with everybody on this. Speaking of anecdotes, I mean, I remember literally 4 weeks into our study of regulatory agencies, having a conversation about with a source about a story, with a lawyer of all things, about an environmental justice issue in LA, and the Chevron doctrine came up. And, you know, here we are talking about, like, you know, deference to regulatory agencies, which I would have never had that conversation. Like, I mean, even little, like, I mean, it's in the scheme of things, it's not sort of a structural issue, but like, it really, it goes back to this point about sort of demystifying the law. You can have conversations, you get the language, you understand the language, to the point where you can have a conversation with somebody and really at least come off like you know what you're talking about, you know. And I felt like in that particular conversation, I kind of did, you know. And so, you know, there's stuff like that, but I think that there's also stuff like, you know, analyzing facts, and being able to better sort of understand the arguments in a not just a case, but on an issue, 2 sides of any kind of an issue. You know, so I think all of those things sort of come together to really help. The other thing I think that Penny was tapping into is, you know, and I know a lot of us are reporters who are sort of in the field, sort of doing day-to-day work. But there's also like management aspirations, or people who are already in management here, as we see from Penny and Jacqueline, you know, like there's a lot of stuff that I think internally we learn here that's really important too. Like Penny mentioned, contracts, and just sort of the idea of being able to negotiate something. I mean, those classes are here for you to learn from. And so just as important as it has been for journalism, I think that it's important in just terms of being a leader in your organization, or being just being a manager, how to deal with stuff going on internally within your own newsrooms and your own teams. The last thing I would just say is that it's made me just sort of, this whole process has made me sort of appreciate journalism itself even more. One of the things that this is going to sound kind of weird coming from a journalist, and I'm a little guilty about it, but I sort of feel like in a way I sort of took the facts, because journalists are all about the facts, for granted in some way, right? Like that was just part of what we do. But like in the law and in these cases, it's like what I have found is that the facts are like everything. So like you got to get your head around what those facts are in order to move forward with an opinion, with any kind of reasoning on a case. And I'm thinking to myself, gee, in journalism, like that's what it is about. It is the same. There's a similar principle involved there. And so I think that that's sort of given me sort of a renewed appreciation for what we do in our own work as journalists. And I guess I would just as a quick tag on to that, Jason, I would just say that, and maybe we'll talk about this in a little bit, but Jacqueline mentioned the criminal injustice that we took together, the criminal injustice class we took together. That was a seminar class. And in these seminars, you sort of have a little bit of perhaps a little bit more flexibility in terms of kind of, on an exam, on a paper or something like that, where we've been able to bring in our journalism to the classroom and apply that journalism to the projects that we do in those classes, the presentations that we have. And I've just been flabbergasted at like how cool that's been to be able to fuse what we do as journalists into the sort of academic part and scholarly part and the legal part of this process, this program. So sorry, that's a mouthful, but yeah, that's kind of what's spilling out of my brain at the moment.
Thanks, Ryan. And so the next question is what I'm going to do for this one is it's about the flexibility and fitting it into your schedule, the program. As the number one question we get by far from people is kind of on the theme of, okay, this sounds great, but how can I possibly make it work? I'm working full time plus, like I have all these responsibilities. And so what we'll do is, so Penny's solution is one of the options. Part of the flexibility is do it full time, take a sabbatical, and bust it out in 9 months. So you can start in August, you can graduate in May. So that's what Penny did. She's now a graduate. The other three are doing the part-time, which is certainly what most of our students do. 80% of our students do part-time. So if one of you could jump in, whoever is the most passionate about this topic, feel free to jump in and talk about how did you make it work for you? How has it worked for you as far as fitting it into your schedule?
I'll jump in. I feel like you have to have a level of flexibility and kind of like an understanding with your editor. And I feel like I'm pretty comfortable in that right now. I think if I was like full-time breaking news, like busy every second of every day, like it would have been different. But now with somewhat more flexibility, it's pretty doable. Personally, I like to do schoolwork on the weekends. I do all of my readings for the upcoming week during the weekends and sometimes during the week, but that's just how I like to structure things. And that's been working for me. It's been pretty doable that way.
Fantastic. Great. So we're going to do a very quick rapid fire round. And so we're going to start with you, Penny. And so the question will be, this is the last question we'll do before we turn it over to the attendees to ask any questions that they might have. So the question is simply list what have been some of your favorite classes. So you can maybe list 1, 2, or 3 classes, just rapid fire for it. So starting with you, Penny.
Oh gosh, it's not fair because my favorite class keeps changing. I really love so many. I would say education law, because it made me cry. It was the only class that made me cry because the cases were so touching, were just so heart-wrenching, that I would end up in tears reading them. But I also loved environmental law, environmental justice. Admin law will not be your favorite class, but it may be your most useful class as a journalist. And then my seminar was on social media and the future of democracy, and it was mind blowing. So it's really hard to pick.
Thanks, Penny. Ryan.
Cities in distress, where we studied cities in distress, like really in distress, and criminal injustice, the one that Jacqueline mentioned earlier. Yeah, definitely. I could say much more, but I'll save you the.
All right, Alejandra.
I've taken less classes than everybody, but so far, I think, but public law was hard for me in terms of like, I guess like following in class, but it was my favorite in terms of the cases that we read and what we learned, just like such foundational cases in our history, like Loving versus Virginia, Plessy versus Ferguson, the I think it was Chai Lung case that, anyway, all of those like really big historical cases have given me so much background for what I do.
Fantastic. Jacqueline.
Yeah, I would say in terms of M.L.S. classes, definitely the writing class I mentioned was by far my favorite for the required courses. It's a lot of work, but it's actually like if you like stop whining, it's actually pretty fun. And then my other favorite classes were seminars, criminal injustice with Professor Olson. She's a wild woman, very entertaining, very just hilarious and brilliant. And really delighted to have journalists in her class. And then also a class I'm in right now with Professor Dolovich. I wanted to take a course with her before I graduated, and it's post-conviction law. And so the cases are just really interesting, really hard. And, you know, I learned how disappointing the Supreme Court is. So
Thanks so much. And as Jacqueline just mentioned, actually, I hear it all the time from the faculty at the law school that the journalists are basically celebrities inside the classes. Like the professors love to have the journalists inside their classes, and I hear all the time saying, "Oh, I have this person. I'm so excited!" and everything. So that's a really fun part of it for it too. But thank you so much all for taking the time. So let's go ahead and turn it over to the attendees now. Attendees, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A box and we'll be able to pose the questions. So as people are typing here, I'll also mention that the program does have 8 specializations to choose from. Additionally, students can do a general studies if they prefer, in which case they can just kind of pick and choose whatever they'd like. I believe that everyone here either did public interest or general studies. Am I correct? Is anyone else doing something else? Okay, great. Yeah, so so certainly most of the journalists end up going public interest because it's very flexible with lots of different options. But that's that. There are 8 specializations to choose from. Question is, do you feel it's feasible to do online or hybrid? I'm based about 3 hours from UCLA without traffic, and I'm not in a position to take a sabbatical. Totally understandable. And the answer is that might be a bit much as far as the current format. So this next year would be residential, and the classes go from 6:30 to 9:30 on Tuesdays, Thursdays, if you're in the part-time program. And the following year, however, August 2023, it's possible, if not likely, that we're gonna have a remote option. And so if I was you, I would just stay in touch with us, and next September is when our applications open for the next cycle, and we'll know at that point if the next year is going to be a remote option. And if so, then that would be a fantastic solution for you at that point.
can I say something about the affordability of the program?
Yes.
Yeah, so since I got the scholarship, I pay I think I've paid around $800 a semester. I didn't get the health insurance through UCLA. I stayed with my employer insurance because it also insures my family. So it's about $800 a semester. So I think it's going to end up being cheaper to go to do this program, thanks to the scholarship, than it was to go to Oklahoma State, which I chose because it was the cheapest school in the Big 12. And then in terms of books, a lot of my classes haven't required books, and a lot of the times the professors are really good about making copies of things for you. And so I think some of the M.L.S courses, we did have to buy books and they can be costly. I've just used Amazon to rent my textbooks, which I found to be a really affordable option, especially if you do it early, because the price goes up the closer you get to school. So anybody out there thinking about finances, those are some things to think about. And if I hadn't gotten the Dean Scholarship, I had been offered an 80% scholarship, which was really generous. Jason mentioned the generous scholarship. So don't let the price tag mix you up too much, because it can actually be like really affordable and also at the same time elevate your career like it did for Penny. So anybody who's shy, I wanted to address the finances.
Hey, Jason.
Yeah,
Can I make a quick note on something also we talked about a little earlier?
absolutely.
So thank you. So just a quick note on favorite classes, because I thought it was, I wanted to let everybody know that, like, even if you don't get your like chosen class for a semester, it's not the end of the world. And I think, an example of that might be like, I think one thing Jacqueline was talking about was like the legal reasoning class. Like, there was no offering for, say, constitutional law per se, constitutional law as a class for part-timers at night, for instance. But the legal reasoning class had elements of constitutional law in it that were great. And the courses that I'm like, for instance, I know Jacqueline and I are taking now have a lot of constitutional law in them. So my point is just like, you may not completely be like way vibing a class like right when you get into it, or you might feel like you're sort of like nudged into taking it, but by the end you might have really enjoyed the class. And I think legal reasoning, and currently we're in American constitutional history, which is like great. So just a caveat to what we were talking about earlier.
Great, thanks, Ryan. And so one of the questions is, are there internships or external shadow options journalism students are able to participate in? So there is internship options through the program. You can join our internship class. And there's certainly, while we don't, what our program doesn't do is we don't have like, oh, here's an internship, you can do it. We allow that, we facilitate internships through opportunities that students find. And as you can see right in front of us, there's lots of opportunities for that if you just ask people questions. So if you're on kind of the front end of your career, for example, and you're looking to possibly get an internship or something, by simply asking the folks who are just in this very program, I'm sure you'd be able to find something that's an amazing opportunity, and we would be able to facilitate that through earning credits as well through that opportunity while you're in the program. So that's that. So that is all the questions that I see. Thank you so much for the panelists for taking the time out of your day to share your experience about the program. And for everyone else, again, April 1st is the deadline to apply for the full tuition scholarship, but April 25th is the general application deadline. So always, you can feel free to connect with us. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for coming.